This episode is brought to you by VinQ. The most innovative and successful dealers in the country say it's time to move to VinQ. Find out why. Go to VinQ.com. Welcome to the David Spisak Show. I'm very thankful that you've taken the time to join me. I know you're going to be awfully glad that you did. I think this is a very rare occasion to get a peek behind the curtains of a company that has really had an impact in the retail automotive industry, especially with the advent, literally from the advent of major tech, e-commerce, online shopping. Shift Digital has been at the forefront of all of that. Why? Because they literally have been the gatekeeper, the vetting process for so many, maybe, I don't even know how many OEMs, we'll find out in a moment, but they've had a huge impact on being able to protect OEMs, make sure that their brand is in alignment at the tier 3 level with what happens at the tier 1 level, and at the same time is actually providing a level of protection to dealers that maybe most people aren't even aware of. So without any further ado, I would love to introduce you to Matt VanDyke, who's the president of Shift Digital. And Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
David, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure on my side too. And this is a rare occasion because I have to tell you, in my 45 years in retail automotive, and Shift Digital covers, not quite half of that, 17, 18 of those years. You literally have had such a huge presence within all things when it comes to online websites, digital retailing, and so many of those things. But I personally, and somebody who prides himself on really going deep and really understanding as much as possible about the organizations within our industry, I just don't have that level of knowledge about Shift, other than what you hear from dealers that are using products through Shift or OEM contacts I have. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I'm super confident that people listening are going to also love getting a peek behind the curtain. So I want to start with this, if you'd be so kind. I'm always fascinated, Matt, by when I speak to people, whether it's a Mike Maroney or it's the head of NADA or Jay Vijayan at Techion, the CEO and founder of that great innovative company, or anything else, Alex Vedder. Everybody took a different path to get here. And it's really interesting to sit here at this moment, I think, and kind of do a M. Night Shyamalan Sixth Sense, rewind the tape and say, how did you get here? So would you mind start off by just giving us an overview of your journey? How did you end up getting into retail automotive, and what transpired to bring you to your position now as the president of Shift Digital?
Yeah, David, thank you for the chance to share. I started out of college, and I was a marketing major and very interested in the advertising side of the business. And I went to work for Young and Rubicam Detroit, who handled Lincoln Mercury Dealer Association in addition to the Lincoln Mercury business. And I quickly went into their field organization and started calling on dealers for tier 2 ad association advertising in Chicago, then in Florida, and just really loved the pace of what that work was, and really found it to be such an interesting part of advertising because the products change every year. I was interested in it because it wasn't marketing the same cereal in a new box in a different year. And I went from Lincoln Mercury Dealer Association to Lexus Dealer Association, and then spent more than 10 years at Team One. And I went from field offices in Atlanta and Chicago to running the Lexus Dealer Association business for Team One. And then from there, kind of got pulled out of a pure retail background into leading brand advertising for Lexus on behalf of their agency. And at the time, my client there was Jim Farley, and Jim got recruited by Alan Mulally to Ford Motor Company. And I loved Toyota and Lexus. I loved living in Los Angeles, and my wife was pregnant with kid number 4, and we were from the Midwest. And Jim Farley said, "We need communications people at Ford. You should you should come here. And so I went client side at Ford, and I spent 15 years at Ford in different jobs, leading advertising in the US, moved overseas to Europe and was the head of global marketing, sales, and service for the Lincoln brand, spent 25 trips to China, did a lot there. And the final job I had at Ford was actually technically leaving Ford to go to Ford Direct. And I was the CEO of Ford Direct. So that kind of takes me from retail through brand, through OEM, back to a really retail-based organization working for a board of directors that was controlled by dealers. And 3 years ago, I had the chance to join Shift, and I did that.
So, man, there's a lot to unpack there. And again, I'm just fascinated because I'm always thinking that, think about this. There's literally, if there was a decision, if you go back in time and, Farley says you should come back. And by the way, I was gonna ask you, when he made that offer, when that offer was proffered to you, and he said you should come back and you should come join Ford on this side, did you relocate from LA to Michigan?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So wife is happy in LA, about ready for child number 4. You say, hey, honey, we won. We're going to get to go back to Michigan. How was her reaction?
Well, she liked it. She grew up in Ohio, and it was getting close to home. So I had kind of come home and said, hey, I got a phone call. Would you want to move to Michigan? And she right away said, yeah, I'd do that. Like, let's go. So, and for me, the interesting part was I loved what I was doing on the agency side of the business with, arguably the best client in the industry. And yet I said, I'd really like to be on the OEM side and see it from a different seat. And that's what, caused me to make the move.
So, one thing I could call out, you'll agree with this. I think the vast majority of us would. Those folks, we're the ones that do what we do in this industry, right? And we're in the face in our own respective ways. You as the head of Shift, and myself for my consulting firm, and dealers for their dealership. But there's this saying, none of us does it alone. And that's really true at the family level, isn't it, Matt?
Oh, no question. I mean, I think if I look back on spending more than 6 months just traveling to China alone while my kids are growing up and having, a wife that carries the freight on all that is huge. And that doesn't even, I'm embarrassed to tell you my Delta mileage status. So yeah, no question.
It's, yeah. And it's, and obviously, we all, if you're all in, there's a massive benefit and there's also a price to pay. There's both sides of that. I've had that, both sides. So I totally get it. It's almost like in those cases, when you're somebody that, hey, you started out with Lincoln and then you're starting to be involved with these tier 2 regionals from Florida to Chicago, to some degree, your family or your kids is in terms of the home and away times, a little bit like a military family. You know what I mean? It really takes and your partner has just got to be a rock star and so incredibly supportive, right?
For sure. I mean, when I came home and said, hey, do you want to move to London halfway through high school and graduate from school over there? That was a moment, and that was an adjustment. And yeah, your point's well taken. The families sure take on a lot. And that's definitely true for all the retailers. I mean, dealers who, the busiest week of the year is Christmas, and, it's really a kind of acknowledgement of just how thankful the brands and OEMs have to be about the front lines of 24/7 customer support.
And I'm glad you said that, because the OEMs, and God bless them, obviously we need them as part of this relationship. But, the OEMs, make no mistake, when there's a federal holiday, they're home, and good for them, thank God. But what would happen if the people on the front lines had that same schedule? If they were home 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, these are some of Thanksgiving weekend, one of the biggest sales weekends of the year, Christmas to New Year's. There's dealers that sell more cars in that week, Matt, than they do the entire month normally. So without those guys on the front line, and then obviously our families that, are usually so supportive. I mean, where would we be? I also had a question about, it's interesting. You went from Lincoln to Lexus and then back to Ford. It's interesting. So, Lincoln at the time, had viability as a brand, and Mercury, maybe not as much. Mercury was never a heavy hitter, but, it was like a supporting brand for sure. But you go from that to, as you said, what many people consider the pinnacle when it comes to OEMs, which is Lexus Toyota. And what lessons were you able to learn through that process of going from Lincoln and then going to Lexus that you were able to say, okay, now that I go back to Ford, I know some things?
Wow. I mean, there was just so many, and not just from the Lexus brand, but also just from the way Toyota, runs their business, and very much a customer first, dealer first organization. The tenets at Lexus and Toyota are that when dealers win and succeed and become very profitable, they invest in people, process, and facility, and they take care of their customers at an even higher level. And I think those brands have, well-earned accolades for that performance. And it did kind of go full circle to me, because I started at Ford on the Ford brand, but then there was a point when Ford said, we need to, not continue to neglect Lincoln, and we need to invest in it. And that's when I think a lot of those lessons for me became, we need to take Lincoln at the time in 2012 from last place sales satisfaction and JD Power Industry into being a customer-centric brand. And many of those tenets still exist there today, as Lincoln had, a really encouraging renaissance for several years.
Matt, you've undoubtedly read the book Good to Great, right? Came out years ago.
Yeah.
Jim Collins. It remains one of my favorite books. I think it should be, a foundational part of anybody's library who endeavors to be a great leader, a great entrepreneur. And the basis of that book was they studied thousands and thousands and thousands of companies, corporations on the stock exchange, and they were seeking the ones that really were in a competitive set, right? Pretty close. And then all of a sudden they broke away. And they managed to not just break away from the pack, but they did it significantly, and they did it over a protracted amount of time, over 10 years. Some, I think, went well over 15 years. And when you look at Lexus versus Lincoln, and I don't care if you want to say Toyota versus Chevy or Ford, Stellantis, or anybody else. I mean, these are brands, by the way, that have broken away from the pack years ago. What confounds me, what I don't understand, is it's so well known and documented, both from the OEM down to the dealers up, regarding that magic that they've created. Why do you think that more OEMs don't adopt that?
I think it really comes down to culture. And, I think there's the famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, because everyone can watch and look at the quality playbooks, but everyone looks to the C-suite and understands, am I going to be rewarded for a stop ship? Or is that going to hurt my quarterly earnings? And I would just say, I think Toyota and Lexus have just had an unwavering commitment to the customer of, we're going to do it right from the start, and we're going to make good decisions. And it's not financially led. I mean, it leads to great financial results for them, but they don't do it to save a few bucks. I mean, I think even in recent years, they've had, as everybody does, challenges with certain recalls. They didn't fix engines, they replace engines straight out. They just constantly would have a culture of doing it right. And that's
I wrote every time.
yeah. And when executives change over, when people change over, they follow the path that was kind of, paved before them. They're standing on the shoulders of people who do that. And it's hard for other companies just to replicate that. It's hard for companies to instill in, line workers, we want you to pull the andon cord and stop the line and, bring a, production line to a halt so you can fix a part. But Toyota has successfully kind of set that benchmark.
I hope you'll indulge me and let me throw something out that just seems completely off the wall, but I think it's analogous. I think that when you look at Lexus Toyota, And the other end of the spectrum, I'm not naming any OEMs. I kind of compared a little bit to the difference between Warren Buffett and a day trader, right? Where a day trader is trying to outsmart, outwit the market, outtime the market. They're trying to, and they're in the now, they're myopic in nature. Warren Buffett stays the course. He knows what the plan is. He knows what matters to his stockholders, and he is not going to deviate. So you talk about things like crypto, he's going to stand on the sidelines until he knows definitively that that's going to be a winner over a long period of time, not this year, not this month, right? And if NVIDIA went nuts tomorrow or somebody else went nuts tomorrow, that doesn't mean he jumps in, nor does he jump out if somebody had a rough quarter. To your point, they had to have recalls. The day trader, on the other hand, is always looking, typically, interestingly, to recover from yesterday's losses, right? They know at the jump that what they do, if they have a winning streak, it's about as sustainable as somebody at a blackjack table or at a craps table. There's no long term there. And I happen to think, it's my belief, that there's a little bit of a similarity there. Do you buy that?
Yeah, I do. And especially in the auto vertical. I mean, just take that analogy further right now. The challenges that our industry are facing with tariffs and trying to predict, and everybody wanting a crystal ball to figure that out. The challenges of the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years of the shift to electrification and how much, what percent of the industry is that going to be, and how fast will consumer adoption go there? I mean, these are huge, multi-billion-dollar bets at individual OEMs. I mean, the product life cycle is, many years, 6 years from now, figure out how many BEVs do I need, right?
But this is a perfect example, what you just served up. Toyota, Warren Buffett said, yeah, I'm not going to jump into the EV thing. Most others said, oh my God, Tesla's starting to get to our share. We're going to go all in. And they invested billions of dollars. And essentially, right, wrong, or indifferently, from a financial perspective and from a dealer having the right product for the right for customers, they guessed wrong. And that's just a reality. And many of them are paying a very significant price. Ford, for example, if you looked at their quarterlies and what their ICE business made versus what the EV business rendered as an outcome, you got one that's losing $40,000 to $60,000 a unit, and the other one's doing very nice, thank you, right? So and they've learned lessons, and I think they're getting smarter, they're getting more sophisticated. But to your point, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you had to think about this back in time throughout your journey that brings you here now as the president of Shift Digital, what would you say was a defining moment in your career, something that was pivotal that brought you to where you are right now? Was it that Jim Farley phone call?
I think probably I would have to point back to the lessons I learned being kind of the executive in charge of working with dealer counsel from Ford and from Lincoln. And in any job I had from the beginning, I worked with dealers and retailers. And what I always found was that when things are really good, if you've got a steep background in brand marketing, you can be a successful marketer. But as soon as things get tough and the bullets start flying, if you don't understand how to really work with dealers and win at retail, you're in trouble, I think, as a marketer at any OEM. And I think some of my deepest friendships and some of the strongest lessons I learned were from working with dealers to help craft policies that would help the dealers win and help our brand win. And that's really what I never forget and really look to.
I love that you called that out. There's a sense of obvious reverence and humility in that. And I think those are critically important in leadership these days, or any day. I think that when we think of leadership, we think sometimes of bravado and confidence, and at times people have a sense of, some level of hubris that exists, and obviously has to have expertise. But I think that it's in a lot of those soft skills that don't get mentioned as much, where leadership really shines. It's not the hard skills, it's those soft skills that allows them to navigate through things. It's those soft skills that allows them to have, not have arrogance, not think that you've arrived, but have ears wide open, brain wide open to be able to absorb those lessons. And then you don't always know in the moment that how much it's going to impact you or your career down the road. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. Let's move from your journey to Shift's journey. So Shift, many people may know, many more may not know how Shift originated. Would you mind just taking us through an overview of Shift Digital from its inception to now?
Yeah, so Shift, you called it right. Started about 2008, in 2008, and the leadership team that started Shift came from a background at Ford Direct. And Ford Direct is a joint venture between Ford Motor Company and its dealers that started in 1999, 2000, which you'll love this, with the Internet Subcommittee of Dealer Council, who were paying attention to Auto Bytel and all these companies that were, at the time aggregating leads, but moving towards selling cars online. And the initial mission of Ford Direct was to help sell cars online. And they were easily 20 years ahead of their time, if not more, given the adoption mostly on complete end-to-end transactional e-commerce. But what Ford Direct did well is it was a smart group of dealers, smart group of people. They quickly got into, hey, what do we need to help dealers in today's world? And they basically invented enterprise lead management, because at the time, putting leads into dealers was super important, and understanding whether dealers were following up with customers and how different dealers were supporting and serving customers became critical. And that know-how got translated over to Shift, because Ford Direct was only and ever going to only serve Ford and Lincoln dealers. And other brands saw this and felt a need to have this. So Shift started as an independent company in order to serve other brands who were looking to improve the consumer experience of shoppers online and people who were submitting leads to dealers. And that was the initial business in 2008.
And was the primary purpose of Shift at that time to basically provide a resource that did not exist at the OEM level that would allow them to essentially achieve their objective of evolving, improving, enhancing their online interactions with the client, while simultaneously keeping them connected and in sync, whether it's at the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 level?
Yeah, that's it. And I'll expand on it. Really, what it was is, number one, there needed to be a technical solution. So Shift technology was developed to integrate with each and every individual CRM that any dealer uses in the country. And that persists today. And the challenge that OEMs had is, an OEM still today, every once in a while, we've got a white paper on the shelf that we can dust off if there's a new client, and says, hey, just have all my dealers use Salesforce. Just have all my dealers use Oracle. So they're on the same database that I'm on. Well, we all know that that's completely impossible, and that's not how dealers run that business. But what Shift started was basically a technical solution that did two-way integration and disposition between a brand and basically all the different fragmented technology systems that dealers use. And then what grew Shift significantly over the last 15 to 18 years was that then translated from, that's a issue at leads, but then it became websites, digital retailing tools, service schedulers, trade-in tools, all these disparate tech ecosystems that are required to run a successful individual dealer or dealer group in order to have those systems actually integrate in a positive way with the brand and OEM systems. That's really what our sweet spot is.
Okay. That's really good to know. I'm curious, as you sit here today, obviously we've seen an unprecedented proliferation of tools out there. And, while on the website side of things, let's start with this. What does Shift Digital touch on behalf of OEMs and manage or co-manage or support on the dealer side? One is CRMs, another one's websites, digital retailing tools. Is there anything else?
Yeah, really kind of almost any tool that would plug into a dealer's website. So all those widgets that have gone across chat, again, trade-in, um, service schedulers, and even today, AI tools, phone tracking systems. Every one of our engagements is unique and different. It depends on brand and brand strategies and, how they collaborate with dealers and what systems they want. But as we know, it's a complicated tech ecosystem. We work with, I think, 250 individual dealer digital suppliers, and we help connect that fragmented ecosystem so that brands and dealers can have independent measurement, reporting, and analytics of how those tools are performing for them. So when we're at our best, what we're doing is we're helping the brand provide dealers with choice of website provider. Because if you go back to 2008, brands would say, hey, if you want to be connected to my website, you got to have a Cobalt website. And dealers quickly became dissatisfied, started paying for secondary websites. Brands couldn't understand what was happening with shopping traffic on those websites. But dealers said, I want to choose a best-in-class provider. So what Shift was able to do is say, hey, what we'll do is we'll create a certified system that you can choose one of several different providers, but we'll aggregate the data, normalize it, measure it, and let brands and dealers independently know how all those websites are performing.
And then I'm very curious, we are starting to see, well, I'll start here. In a consumer environment, while companies could have all kinds of meetings in terms of strategy and marketing, and here's what our narrative is going to be, and here's what we're going to put out next year, 2 years from now. At the end of the day, the decision is made by the customer, isn't it? And the customer is what's driving things. So I've often said, for anybody who misses some of these brick and mortar stores that we've seen shut down over the last 4 or 5, 6 years, that was at the hands of really Gen Z and our millennials. It started with Gen X and then millennials, because there's a saying that once somebody finds a superior way to do things, they will never go back to the inferior way of doing things. So what happened was, in the beginning, when my older son, Trey, was literally 12, 13, 14, he would have been considered very much in the minority. He was shopping online, never went to a store, but he might have been 1% of the population that was doing that. As he started to grow up, starts to make money, like other millennials or Gen X's, they start to represent a bigger and bigger part of the consumer pie. And as that pie grows and says, I do like this thing, Amazon, I do like Instacart, I do like this, I do like that, all of a sudden it starts putting pressure on brick and mortar, and what they were offering to consumers was no longer seen as great of a benefit as just the ability to save time and have convenience. You agree with that? So now let's put that over into automotive. Again, I gave you an analogy earlier. Here's another kind of just a connection. Isn't consolidation, the direction and the movement and the acceleration of consolidation, going to have a similar impact? Because as consolidators are out there, whether they're large publics like Lithia or AutoNation, Sonic, or others, or you talk about the big privates that are out there like Hendrix or AMSI, all of a sudden they find themselves with 30, 40, 50 stores, 100 stores, and more importantly, 15, 18, 20 plus brands, and they're looking to unify that client experience online. Because the client experience, as we know, the shopping journey starts online 80, 90% of the time. And frankly, most of that is starting on this now. So as that happens, they're needing to make sure they evolve to meet customers where they are. But they also seem to have this understandable need to try to bring as much unification to the tech stack and to their ability to deliver a consistent experience. how is that starting to, no pun intended, shift things at Shift Digital? Is that something that you guys, on an annual basis, you start to look at that curve and say, okay, we're going to need to have some additional meetings, maybe with OEMs, and see if we can find some way of moving closer and closer to allowing somebody to have those unified tech stacks?
Yeah, I think a unified tech stack won't happen in auto. And I think a few years ago, it was a real question. And there was a little bit of a fallacy because people were looking at Tesla and saying, wow, this is what customers want. You just go online and they have the inventory, they have the price, they have a unified consumer experience. At most OEMs, people kind of got it wrong and thought you could make 3 clicks and you never had to talk to a human and you bought a car. Wasn't really the case. What you really did is you got a phone call and then you went through a process and credit and all these other things. But the reality is that system works pretty well when demand exceeds supply. But as soon as supply exceeds demand, which has been basically almost the entire time since, World War II,
For years, yeah.
with the exception of the pandemic, the more efficient system is franchise dealers who are far more innovative than, a single brand can be, using individual resources, best technology tools that change, evolve, adapt, get better. And so the important thing from our standpoint is allowing that fragmented tech system to exist and thrive, but bring it all together from a perspective of data, measurement, and increasingly consumer activation, so that what you can do is stitch together those systems. I mean, the reality is the very best chat tool isn't necessarily the very best website, isn't necessarily the very best digital retailing tool, isn't the best CRM or DMS or anything. And I don't think that that's likely to change. And I don't think that there's any OEM or brand that's going to win and say, well, Salesforce works for us, so put your whole business on that. Just isn't going to happen.
And then another thing that's going on now that I think needs to get greater and greater awareness. A couple things. We've known for years that whatever website provider somebody uses, when that website shows up out of the box, it is typically optimized, right? In terms of performance, speed, mobile, and so forth. Then when you start to add, widgets to it, things that are framed in, right? Whatever it might be, those things have the potential and the ability to either be an asset or a liability. And they're a little bit, to me, like going to the doctor. If I just have one prescription I need, it's for a specific issue, and there's only 2 outcomes. It's going to work perfectly and my issue is going to be resolved, or it's not going to work perfectly and they'll come back and they'll give me some other solution that will. If I happen to be going into the doctor for my 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th prescription, then there's a whole nother thing that you have to deal with, and that's how do they interact with each other. So that might take care of the issue at hand, say allergies, but might interact in a poor way that either decreases the efficacy of other prescriptions, or worse yet, doesn't play nice and causes me to have issues I didn't have yesterday, and maybe I would rather have the allergy. So you start adding all these things to websites. So one, it can cause a performance speed issue, and speed kills, right? We know if somebody gets on your website, takes 3 seconds or more to load on your mobile phone, many of them are going to bounce. They're going to be out. But then there's a whole second part, which is just actually the UI or the experience, the UX, the experience for the client. And so when they go on, and I see websites where you get on the desktop and, hi, I'm Doreen. You have any questions? Hey, would you like our best price? And then, hey, all of a sudden I got these pop-ups like somebody's jumping in front of me. I always imagine, I try to translate for dealers their website to a physical reality. So I say, let's go to your showroom. And I walk in, right? And I get somebody to go, hey, how are you? I'm Bob. Do you have any questions? And then somebody else jumps in, hey, would you like to see our best price? and it diminishes the client experience. Take it to a mobile, and it goes from an annoyance to completely oftentimes blocking half or all of that screen. What would you say to dealers as we sit here in 2025? Because you brought up something interesting. You can't just replicate Tesla. Tesla can't even replicate Tesla right now. The cars are not as popular. They got cars stacking up like it's, I won't say a brand, but like a brand that's got an unpopular, slow moving model. The X is down over 90% this year, Matt. The S is down 90% this year. The Y is dominating, and the 3 is also does pretty well. But they can't even do what they did. Secondly, Deloitte did some research some time ago, not too long ago, where it's the reality is people want to meet sometimes who they're dealing with. They want to touch the car. They want to drive the car. So we have to continue, I think, to do a better and better job of creating a seamless environment from the online to the offline, number one. What have you guys learned? You're managing millions. 16,000. 16,000. This is part, by the way, for everybody listening, I'm taking this from the 2025 Digital Automotive Shopping Pulse Report put out by Shift Digital pretty recently. And you'll find a link to this on the show notes, as well as I'll post it on my LinkedIn. But you've touched a lot of websites. You've seen a lot of things. What would you say to dealers out there who want to optimize their ability to connect with clients, resonate with clients, and ultimately acquire clients?
Yeah, I think your 10 prescription analogy is a good one, right? Because, your digital retailing tool is great. Your chat tool is great. And as you said, the website, when it comes out of the box, works really well. By the time you put those things together along with 4 other widgets, you've probably got one of the slower website experiences that you can possibly have. Now, that's not the fault of your website provider. In some cases, it can be the fault also of the brand who is putting, content that they want to load banners on your home pages. In some cases, it's self-inflicted by a dealer who says, I built a $20 million facility, and their ad agency created a 15-second drone flyover video that they put on their homepage, and all of it can slow that down. So part of that Pulse report you're mentioning is that we're trying to shine a light on this challenge, because auto industry dealer websites are far less good performing than other verticals. And dealers should educate themselves and, go to pagespeed.web.dev. That's something you can Google. You can see how
Pagespeed.web, pagespeed.web.dev.
And what you can do in there is you can test your desktop site and your mobile site and how Google ranks it. And that's critically important in today's world, to see customers continue to show up, have a good consumer experience. And there's a lot of people you actually have to work with to make that experience better. But that's what we're motivated by. We're having those conversations with website providers. We're having those conversations with brands. We're having those conversations with emerging technology providers that have technical solutions that actually improve SEO and improve website performance. So that's the kind of thing that keeps us, up and at it every day.
Got a couple thoughts that pops into my head as you share that with us, and I appreciate it. Number one, unintended consequences are typically not very good, right? It's one of those things that, oh my God, we didn't think about that. So the good thing about an OEM having a unified website strategy is having a baseline where all the Nissan sites, let's say, look essentially the same. The unintended consequence, I believe, is if I'm a Nissan dealer, especially if I'm, a high-performing Nissan dealer, if I'm a very high-performing Nissan dealer, and then all of a sudden I feel like you're throttling me by forcing me to go into a website because the guys in the lower 50% were not doing a very good job, and so you want to make sure that you at least get a baseline average. So it seems to me the unintended consequence all of a sudden maybe is responsible somewhat for all of these add-on widgets as people are trying to differentiate their website, because essentially, with no offense intended to anybody or to any manufacturer, but let's be honest, if there's 12 Nissan stores or 12 Honda stores or 12 Ford stores in my market. And we have the same website selling the same models with the same incentive programs with the same. I'm no different, fundamentally than two-ply toilet paper. I'm commoditizing things. And I've spent a lot of time, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I've invested a lot of time, money, and effort into my culture. I've invested a lot of time developing my people. But now those things are in the physical world. And 90% of my prospective clients are going to start on the online, where I'm not differentiated by my culture or those things that really will ultimately matter. So is that a potential problem and an unintended consequence of having these same OEM websites?
Yeah, I think there's definitely can be a tension there. And if you look across different brands, oftentimes luxury brands will do more generally to lock down brand identity, colors, fonts, look and feel, sometimes site navigation. Mass brands oftentimes much more wide open. But if you look across the space, what you described earlier of chat pop-up coming, then you go to a different page and it comes back and you close it and you close it and you close it, iframes coming, pop-ups with offers, that can still be pervasive in our industry. And so what we try and do is consult with the OEM clients and strike the right balance for their brands and their dealers, whereby there's a choice of providers, innovation remains so that not every website performs the same, looks the same. There's a range of templates, look and feel, and choice about what tools go in there and how they are operated by the dealers. That's really what we believe in. And at no point does anyone have it perfect. And it's a constantly evolving space. We talk to different suppliers with different tools and different ideas on how to increase leads, drive increased engagement, vehicle detail pages, site speed, each and every week. And what we try and do is work individually with all of our OEM clients to create that right formula and mix that lifts up the dealer network as a whole and gives enough individual choice and freedom whereby the dealers can put their own stamp on things and do it their own way.
It's great. Just one other question or topic I'd want to serve up to you with regards to websites, because it seems to be becoming more and more pervasive, is where somebody signs up with a third-party provider who then accesses their website for the purpose, one specific purpose. And in doing so, they have access to that client's database. Now, there's a couple things that to me are very noteworthy in this age of heightened FTC and ever increasing amounts of attempts for identity fraud and grabbing data like CDK was unfortunately victimized with last year. But when I have a third-party solution that works with a dealer, and then they take that consumer data and very oftentimes, unbeknownst to that same dealer who is paying them for a service, turning around and taking that data and reselling it to somebody else. That's a problem. That's a big gaping hole for that dealer. And the dealer ultimately is responsible, as you know. If you have that data and originated with you, one of the things I share with dealers all the time is you have warranty data, operational data, credit card data, consumer data. You've got all kinds of data sitting within that DMS of yours. And while you only own one of them, the operational, you are legally bound. You have a moral and ethical and legal obligation to control, secure all of that data. And that includes the data for any vendor who's accessing your system. I also have seen many dealers who had stopped working with a vendor and the vendor continues to pull data packets. And unless the dealer has a pretty sophisticated, engaged IT person, like legitimate certified IT person who runs a consistent process of checking who's getting into your system. Tekion, by the way, one of the things they announced, I can't remember exactly what it was called, Integration Hub maybe, but it allows their dealers to do something that previously was unheard of. They could see everybody in and everybody pulling out, but not everybody has that. So with respect to what you guys do, and you have such a deep level of knowledge and engagement with these things that are all online, have you seen that where you say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Dealer, somebody's taking your data and going outbound with it? And what do you do about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt it's a real issue, and I'm thinking back. I think I updated my operating system on the iPhone last night, and I have to admit I clicked accept, and I did not read all the fine print in there. I think I feel pretty good about Apple being trustworthy, but I will say this: we obviously see tons of contracts from tons of suppliers, and I definitely have seen contracts written the way you describe, which a dealer opts into a targeting company, an ad agency that puts tags on their site to seemingly unwittingly get, in-market shoppers in their DMA. And what they don't realize is that they just authorize that company to share all of the shopper data off their website with others who opt into it. So one of the things,
money on it.
And make money on it and put them at risk, to your point. I think that's one of the things at Shift that obviously there isn't any contract that goes through the system that doesn't get read, reviewed, and thoroughly analyzed to make sure it's protecting brand and dealer. And so all the certified suppliers in our programs for all of our brands meet the latest TCPA, CCPA, CPRA compliance guidelines. Our partners who are the brands are insisting on insurance that protects dealers. Every one of our engagements and everyone we work with, no one has access to any individual dealer's data that can be sent to another data or resold in any way. So these privacy and data security challenges are real. They're really important. And that's one of the things I think that people probably they maybe take for granted that are a part of these certified OEM programs, in addition to things like 30-day out clauses and other things that have in the past been kind of one-sided, maybe for a vendor and not for a dealer.
So Matt, you're running things for me. Unintended consequences. I was going to ask you just very directly because, I'll tell you something you probably are already aware of, your people are already aware of. There are dealers out there and managers that actually lament Shift, that will vilify Shift, that say, man, Shift doesn't give me the options that I'd like to have, so I can have the same CRM or the same DR, the same website across 15, 18 different brands. As you said, incredibly complicated, not just on the tech stack side, but on the OEM side, okay? Because the OEMs are going to want what the OEMs want. And that means you, to some degree, you also have to start with getting 18 OEMs together, which if you try to get 18 OEMs together, you probably couldn't get them to agree on what sandwich place to go to for lunch, much less what DR tool that everybody wants to use. So you hear people lament about this and have frustration, but I was going to ask you, tell me 3 things at least that most people, including Shift clients, dealers out there, probably don't know that comes with that Shift relationship that has tremendous value. What I heard you say, see if I can remember, one of them has to do with cybersecurity, compliance, protecting consumers' data, protecting dealers' data. The second one is a 30-day out. A third one, at least, was we don't see, we don't touch, we don't aggregate. We don't sell your data to anybody. And those are 3 pretty big ones. Are there any others?
Yeah, no, I think you hit on the big ones. I mean, beyond that, it's holding suppliers accountable to service level agreements to the benefit of the dealer and the network, and also really using the data for good. I mean, I'll tell you one story. When after certified websites became a thing, pretty quickly after that, like certified advertising programs became a thing. And this is one where some brands have co-op programs, some brands have advertising programs, not all brands do. But when we first started managing these programs for different brands, we saw a really, really dramatic chasm between a good media mix and a bad media mix. And what we were able to do is sit down and see dealer advertising suppliers who had optimized media mix so that search was a big component of it and programmatic display was a small component of it, and literally flipped the auto industry media mix to be much more optimized to working hard for dealers. And that's because we're able to use independent measurement data and analytics in order to have those suppliers and dealers see what's performing and what's not. And what we really see is we're a partner to the supply base, to website suppliers, digital retailing tools, and the like. And from my vantage point, the very best vendors to dealers are the ones who come to us every quarter for a quarterly business review and want to see how they stack up blind branded against whoever else they're competing against to serve dealers. And oftentimes they're using that data to make user experience improvements, make decisions on, do I have my lead gate in the right place? Should I have one at all? That's what we're able to provide to the vendor supplier network, and behind the scenes in a big way, in our view, really support dealers.
You remember the old term WYSIWYG? Remember that, Matt?
What you see is what you get.
Yeah. One of the things that jumped out at me on your Pulse report is that WYSIWYG doesn't really apply necessarily on the website or marketing front, especially, or the lead front, right? More is not necessarily more when it comes to lead, and more is definitely not more when it comes to website. There is a line of a point of diminishing return on websites when you start adding this and this and this, as we mentioned. But it seems like there is a you mentioned a chasm in another respect. There's a chasm, or definitely a divide, between the perception that's out there. Well, heck, I'm going to go with the company that just generates the highest volume of leads. And lead companies for years have known this. And so what they do is they just push on that button that we give you 20%, 30%, 50% more leads. What in the heck does that have to do with how much money or how many car deals I actually get, or how many clients I have the real opportunity to connect with? So I can have something that creates 2,000 more eyeballs into my website, but what if 90% aren't the right eyeballs? What if they're not in market? What if I get 50% more leads? But when you look at it from a qualitative standpoint, it's terrible. It doesn't stand up. So it sounds like, based on the Pulse report, that's something else that you guys are taking a really hard look at to be able to deliver to your clients some insights on an ongoing basis that don't necessarily jump just because somebody's saying, I could give you a lot more leads. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think that evaluating the ROI of all of your traffic by source and leads especially is super important. And I think it's kind of a nonstop journey of learning and discovery, which makes it challenging to be a dealer, especially if you don't have a centralized marketing department, if you're not big enough to have some dedicated people who know the right questions to ask and the places to look. But that absolutely increasing efficiency and effectiveness of dealership advertising and marketing is the name of the game. And I think from our standpoint, where we're serving OEM clients, what we remind them of on a regular basis is 75% of all the traffic in the industry isn't on their brand website. It's on their dealer network's website, because ultimately customers are drilling in to look for inventory and price, and paying attention to optimize the transparency of that experience for dealers is just a huge, huge leverage point for the best performing brands.
Yeah, that's great. As we, first of all, I want to thank you again for giving me your time and giving me the opportunity to kind of pull the curtain back and allow myself and the folks that are listening to learn a lot more about, well, your journey, the Shift journey to where they are now, and what Shift does in the marketplace, and kind of also to separate perception from reality, because I think that's incredibly important. we hear about the word transparency all the time in our industry, and it always typically is connected first and foremost to the need to be transparent with our customers or clients from a dealership perspective. But, I'm of the belief that we need to elevate transparency on every side of this business. OEMs, please provide the same level of transparency to your clients, i.e. dealers, as you have an expectation for them to provide to their customers. Vendors, your clients are dealers and the customers they serve. You should have a requirement to be able to provide full transparency. And that goes from the terms of your agreements to the small print, make it big print, to the level of service you provide, and obviously delivering on the expectation that was created. Folks that are out there still are people out there, as you know, Matt, that are unscrupulous dealers. And they're advertising because they know, again, there's an algorithm that says, if I put the lowest price, I'm going to get that best price sticker, from whatever marketing site that I'm on, third-party lead aggregator site maybe that I'm on. And yet when the person shows up at the dealership, then they add this and this and this and this. And so they're not transparent at all, and they're actually creating great harm to the face of the industry and the 90% really good, solid dealers that have genuine intentions to exceed the expectations of their customers. I take it you buy into what I'm sharing, that the more transparency we have in every direction, in every level of our industry, it's actually great for our industry.
Oh, I agree 100%. I'll say quickly, I think every January, Capital One publishes at least in recent years, auto shopping study that focuses on trust and transparency. And it shows the perception that consumers have of transparency of a dealership versus a dealer's own rating of that transparency. And our industry has gotten better on that, but I think everything you said goes right to kind of the core of that. And that really helps dealers improve their business.
All right. Since we're landing here on transparency and we're at the top of the hour, let's be fully transparent. Matt, first of all, what was the first car you ever owned?
Oh boy, I guess I can't claim that let's see, the first one I owned. The first one I drove was a 1980 Honda Civic with a 2-speed Honda-matic transmission that had no clutch. And that was probably, a little hand-me-down from parents. The first one I owned was actually an Eagle Talon TSI, which was a pretty quick car.
That car had a moment in the sun. That's kind of a hot-looking car for a domestic.
For a minute. It was cool. It was really neat.
Yeah, very, very cool. All right. What's the favorite car that you've had in all these years that it's like a great pair of old jeans that you just love it. Like you could own this car forever. You just enjoyed the ride.
Oh man. Well, I had a 1974 Bronco that I owned for over 20 years. And I actually sold it last year to make room in my garage for something that's next. And I haven't decided what that's going to be yet. I'm on the hunt.
I love two of my favorite words, what's next. So let's end there. What's next for you? What's next for Shift?
Gosh, what we're doing is kind of just moving at Shift from not just independent measurement, reporting, and analytics to provide dealers and brands transparency to make good decisions, but into helping stitch all that data together in a complicated automotive ecosystem for activation and using the data in order to make your marketing more efficient and effective. And I think in the next couple of years, with increasing AI applications and solutions, that holy grail of marketing that I promise you've been looking at for 45 years of get the right message to the right customer at the right time. It's hard in our business because you've got data from all these disparate sources. AI is pulling that together and making those improvements possible. So we're really leaning into that and seeing where those applications take us. For me personally, I love getting the chance to work with car dealers each and every day, and with different brands supporting, making our industry win. So I love what I'm doing here, and hope to keep talking to you on channels like this.
Well, I would very much look forward to it. I believe you had said offline that you were not going to make it to this year's New York Auto Show, correct?
That is correct.
Conflict. But perhaps when I come up to visit Northwood, I know it's not like right next door, but hopefully one of these trips to Detroit or the Detroit area, maybe we'll have a chance to get together either there or at one of the industry events this year. But thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. Appreciate the conversation. And like I said, hopefully we'll stay connected because we share definitely a passion to figuring out more and more and more of these what are currently still mysteries or things that have not been solved so that we can help in turn dealers find a longer term solution, a more sustainable solution that doesn't require some type of an external event like a pandemic, like a chip shortage, like a tariff situation, which right now is driving new car volume up in a lot of different areas. So I'll appreciate having the opportunity to stay connected.
Likewise. Thanks so much, David. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you. For everybody who's taking the time to join, again, thank you so much. I'm confident that you got great value in this. And by the way, if you have somebody out there in the industry that would benefit from this conversation, all the things that Matt shared, the insights and the things kind of behind the curtain about what's happening at Shift Digital and just more about Matt, please take the time to share the episode out. I would appreciate it. Obviously, subscribe or download. You could do that at either Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You could also go to davidspisak.com. What's kind of cool there is you'll not only get access to this episode, but you'll get show notes, including where you can contact Matt via LinkedIn, for example, and in case you may have some additional questions or you need help at your dealership. Maybe you heard something you said, I didn't know we could do that. And so you could reach out to Matt, and I'm sure that he or one of the members of his leadership team would be happy, right, Matt, to reach out.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. Thanks for taking the time. Please always take the time to do a review as well. If it's bad, if it's good, if it's ugly, I love them all. I learn from them all. So with that, I want to thank you again for joining me here on the David Spisak Show. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.